Okay, people, simple question. Was it a mistake for Callisto Protocol to focus on melee combat over the usual third-person shooting that we've become accustomed to in these survival horror games? Now, Callisto Protocol is not by any means the only game in survival horror to do melee combat or to focus on it. It's just one in recent memory that seems to have homed in on it, because games like Silent Hill in the past have had heavy focus on melee combat where you would only have so many bullets, and then once you're out of ammo, it was time to get the stick out, it was trying to get the pipe, the axe, and fight from there. I think the one that springs to mind that focused on melee combat, I guess Downpour counts too, but Silent Hill is the one where Homecoming, especially Homecoming, and Downpour really focused on melee combat. So it was like you were picking up melee weapons and using them, and obviously they did not review well. I personally do enjoy those titles, but I can definitely see why some people don't. From a gameplay standpoint though, they were so heavily focused on melee combat that I do wonder if that was one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like those games, because Resident Evil 4 was out at that point, and that is what people wanted, right? They wanted the over-the-shoulder point at these monsters and shoot them. And I've heard different arguments from different people regarding melee combat with Callisto, where they claim that because you're so close to the monsters, so close to the enemies, it kind of loses the fear, because you're not trying to keep them away from you, you're trying to get as close as possible. And I can see the argument for that, but I mean, did that really stop things from being scary in Silent Hill, for example? Because you would get pretty close to them, although you would argue the fixed camera angles kind of prevent that from being a thing. But you get what I'm saying, where it's like you have to get close in order to do the combat. But Callisto decided to go against the grain, and it was like, right, we don't want to do too much shooting. It's not like there aren't guns involved. There isn't, and obviously you do have to shoot a lot of these enemies, because once you get to a certain point in the game, the enemies do open up. Like once you've hit them a few times with the melee weapons, these tentacles kind of spurt out the chest, and then you've got to take a shot at the chest, otherwise they're going to mutate and get even stronger and faster and have more combos. And you really want to avoid that, and it becomes kind of a juggling effect later on, because you're trying to be as quiet as possible, and if you shoot your weapons, so the game is really doing its best to try and make you avoid firing your gun. I kind of like this, if I'm being perfectly honest, and it's more so to do with, it's just different. I'm so used to the Resident Evil 4 style that Callisto being different, I appreciate it. And it's funny because obviously Callisto gets all the time compared to Dead Space. It's always like, oh look, it's Dead Space from Wish, or oh look, it's Dead Space's really cheap, weak cousin. But it's like, the one thing it did completely different from Dead Space was melee combat. So it's like the biggest factor of its gameplay is completely different. So it's kind of hard to compare the two, if you ask me. Sure, they have sci-fi settings. Sure, they have the little gimmicky comments like instead of shoot the limbs, it was shoot the tentacles. I really wish that wasn't in the game. You're going to learn from me that I don't really like when games do these whole Easter eggs to previous franchises. Like, is anyone else sick of seeing the carpet layout from The Shining? It's like, okay, we get it. The Shining's a very popular horror movie. We don't need to keep seeing the references to it. It does get old. But yeah, Callisto, I feel like it did something different, and I appreciate that. Now, whether it did it well or not is a different argument. Now, if you look at the combat as super simplistic, which every survival horror melee combat focused wise is really, really simplistic. It's either hold R1, look at the enemy, and then press an attack button and you swing it, and that's it. There's no dodge mechanic, no nothing. Now, Silent Hill Homecoming did the exact same thing, but did incorporate a proper dodge, so you do have to time it with the strike, so it is in some ways, Silent Hill Homecoming does melee-focused combat better than Callisto Protocol does, which is crazy, because that game came out, I mean, it's on 360, I'm not sure exactly when it came out, but it's getting on a bit now, right? But yeah, that did the dodging mechanic a little bit differently. Now, Callisto essentially it's like playing Punch-Out on Nintendo, where like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, if you will, where it's like you go to the left or you go to the right, or even that had timing, or you press down to like block and whatnot. But this is just literally hold left, hold right, and then swing. A lot of people have a lot of issues with the combat, and at first it's more so, why is it so hard to control? But then when you realize it's not hard to control, it's just different, then it turns into, wow, it's really repetitive. It is. And I'm not here to argue with you. It is extremely repetitive. And Callisto doesn't do a lot of things right, but I definitely think Callisto gets too much hate. I do. And I don't think it's warranted, because the quality's here, the animations are great, the impact of the strikes is great, the gore, the enemies that you're fighting is cool. Sure, it could have done with some variety in that aspect. It could. But all I'm here to ask is, do you think the melee combat hurt Callisto? And if Callisto was more like Dead Space, more like a shooter, would you have enjoyed it more if it was more, give me more assault rifles and shotguns and pistols and sniper rifles, and let me shoot these enemies from a distance? Would you have preferred that for Callisto? Or are you glad with what you got? It's a simple question. Let me know in the comments down below. If you like content like this, and you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button. It's the only way you're going to get more like this. But yeah, people, let me know how you feel down below. That's all I got. I'll catch you later.